Hello, BookTube. And once again, apologies for missing the day yesterday, not only with our read-alongs, but with any videos of any kind. It was hot and bright and humid here, and it was a dream after how many months of feeling an icy chill right down deep in my bones. So all I did was just lounge around with Frida and read. But we're doing our read-alongs today, and we'll make up for lost time. We'll do our read-alongs next Sunday, barring another heat wave. So we're reading Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, and we are the book isn't entirely helpful in terms of chapters, but we're reading. Did I mark it here? We're reading. We're reading right up to the beginning of part 3 of the book. So the roughly 150, 200 pages that come before part 3, and the story so far is on one level fairly simple. Two retired Texas Rangers, Captain Call and Captain McCrae, are on the Texas border, the border of Mexico, in a rundown ranch when a former colleague of theirs from their Texas Ranger days, a gambler and a ladies' man named Jake Spoon, rides into Lonesome Dove and fills their heads with talk of the northern plains, 1,000 miles away, and how a man who set a stake of a cattle herd up there could make a very prosperous name for himself easily. And Captain Call has been he's been itching for activity of some kind. He's been chafing at being down in Lonesome Dove in their little town, doing nothing except patrolling an empty border. His friend and partner, Gus McCrae, is perfectly happy to sit on the porch and drink and to gamble and also to visit Lonesome Dove's whore, a young woman named Lorena, who is beautiful and spirited and intelligent, and who becomes taken with Jake Spoon. He has a kind of low, seedy charisma that works on quite a few people, and it works on her. And eventually, it doesn't take much work. Eventually, Call decides to up his entire company and make a cattle drive all the way to Montana. An astonishing feat. Driving cattle through unknown physical territory and also through the territory that is still patrolled by bands of the marauders, bandits, and Indians that in their Texas Ranger days, Call and McCrae were tasked with eliminating. So it's no small thing. It's a Homeric undertaking. And they head off. That was the first chunk of pages that we read. And most of what we get in the second chunk of pages is their adventures along the way. Jake Spoon is not willing to help rustle cattle. He is not willing to help with the work of the herd. Instead, he and Lorena sort of travel in parallel near the herd and his friends, but not right with it, separate on their own. And because they are separate on their own, because Jake often leaves to go into the nearest town and gamble, Lorena is alone when she encounters a Comanchero named Blue Duck, infamous in the territory, one of the worst people that Call and McCrae did not kill. And he abducts her. In the middle of a cattle stampede, he abducts her. And when Augustus finds out, he berates himself for being so casual as to leave her in the intermittent company of someone as irresponsible as Jake Spoon, and decides to ride off and retrieve her from Blue Duck and his band of bandits. He doesn't take anyone else with him. He just goes off on his own. It's a note that Larry McMurtry hits sparingly and usually in a minor key, but the realization that we're supposed to have very firmly in place before we get to the chapters that we're reading today is that Call and McCrae are Homeric figures themselves, in the sense that we saw in the Odyssey, where they are greater than the present day. They come from an earlier age in which a man could just saddle up and ride off against a crowd of bandits and expect to win. Unfortunately, Blue Duck is also from that era, but we'll get to that. That becomes more apparent in these pages that we're reading today. En route, Augustus McCrae encounters a band of Indians and is forced to sacrifice his horse to make a fort and also to to give himself a small strategic advantage. It works, but he finds himself on foot, carrying his saddle in the middle of nowhere, and encounters a group of people that we have met before. A sheriff named July Johnson, his little boy, his hapless deputy, Roscoe, and a young girl, a feral young girl that Roscoe encountered, who is wearing a sack, but lean, limber, fast, and very smart. And Augustus learns from them that July Johnson, his original goal was to track Jake Spoon, but he is now searching for his wife, who has gone missing, who has wandered off. And Augustus needs a horse because he has a mission of his own, which is to finish tracking down Blue Duck and his bandits, ride into their camp, kill them all, and retrieve Lorena. As he tells July Johnson and his little band, though that crowd of bandits does not know it, but the wrath of the Lord is about to descend on them. He borrows a horse from them, and of course July Johnson, who's a lawman, wants to go along. He's never been in action before. He's never killed anyone. And Augustus worries that maybe he'll get in the way, but he insists. So the two of them ride off to the camp, and when they get there, Augustus McCrae rides into the camp and simply serially shoots every one of those bandits, just kills every one of them. Lorena is physically unharmed, but she is mentally traumatized, and he can't leave her. When he sees that, he's not willing to ride in, save her, and then ride off again. So he warns July Johnson, because the one person who is not in the camp is Blue Duck. Augustus McCrae kills every one of his men, but they never get off a shot. They never have a chance. But Blue Duck is not there. And Augustus McCrae tells July Johnson, get back to your people. There's a dangerous man on the river, and I doubt your deputy can handle him, but it's too late. It's too late. This is a pitiless book. In many, many ways, this is a pitiless book. We learn their stories. McMurtry does a great job of giving every single person in this book a story. That also is Homeric. And then they die. And that makes it feel worse than if they were anonymous. And sure enough, while July Johnson and Augustus McCrae were after Blue Duck's band, Blue Duck backtracked and kills everyone. He kills Roscoe, he kills the boy, and he kills the little girl, Janie. He kills her as well. And when July Johnson gets back to them, he finds just a pile of bodies, and is clearly traumatized himself. Starts to try to dig out a grave for them with a hand knife. Eventually, Augustus, leading Lorena, rejoins him and gives him a little speech about how, this happens on the open plains. This happens to everybody. It will happen someday to Blue Duck. For one reason or another, either he'll get shot by someone or he'll die of old age. And we leave July Johnson. We leave him there. And Augustus makes his way back to the herd, back to Call, who had been worried that maybe he was dead. And all the men had missed his talking. But he won't help them any more than he did before. In fact, he's going to parallel the same arrangement that Jake Spoon had with Lorena before, and keep themselves separate from the herd, mostly, until she starts to feel better, is how he puts it. Until she starts to work through her trauma just a little, with silence and with crying and with clinging. Alongside this storyline is another one that involves Jake Spoon, and that takes up a lot of the pages that we're reading today, and that shows a kind of parallel that we're getting in these pages, which is a look inside two different outlaw worlds. Both of whom have innocent, or at least, likable people at their center. The first is the horrible world of Blue Duck and his bandits, which we see at least in large part through Lorena's viewpoint of how awful they are, how murderous and monstrous they are. And the other view of such a world that we get is the Suggs brothers, the murderous Dan Suggs and his brothers, and Jake Spoon. He has fallen in with a murderous band of brothers who steal horses, they kill people, they burn people, they are psychopaths. Dan Suggs, certainly the leader, is a psychopath. And they don't completely trust Jake Spoon, and he doesn't trust them at all. and he's trying to figure out a way to get away from them. He's certain that they won't part ways with him without trying to rob him, and that they won't try to rob him without trying to kill him, and he's... There are potentials there. It's tough to read Jake Spoon. You have to read between the lines. When we see him in action, which is very rarely and always poorly, it's always to his detriment. But when we see him in action, he is a dead shot and a fast one. It's entirely possible that if he were anything like Call or McCrae, he would simply have killed Dan Suggs, realizing correctly that the other Suggs brothers would not do anything if their domineering and murderous older brother were dead. It's also possible that Jake Spoon could simply have killed them all, as we see Augustus McCrae do to a band of drunken bandits that's not very different, except there are more of them. But no, Jake is weak. He's not made of that same material, so he vacillates, and we watch him vacillate the whole time while the Suggs brothers are killing people and burning them and stealing horses and stealing whiskey and stealing money. Jake the whole time is miserable because it's not him. He doesn't want to do it, but he doesn't trust that he can safely get away. And the sort of signpost event, you've got the beginning of these chapters, you've got Augustus McCrae saving Lorena. And at the end of these chapters, you've got our heroes, Call, P.I., Newt, and Augustus McCrae and Dietz, catching up with the Suggs brothers. And Dietz is an expert tracker, and he lets Call know long before they get there that Jake Spoon is with them. And there is no possibility of special treatment. He was along for the ride while a band of outlaws killed people and stole horses. And once Call and McCrae get the drop on the Suggs brothers, they do it easily and are preparing to hang them. And Augustus McCrae, he tells Jake Spoon, you rode on the other side of the law long enough to know how this works. You ride with an outlaw, you die with an outlaw, and the penalty is exactly the same for everything, for horse trading, for horse stealing, and for murder. And so are these old friends are forced by what is right to hang Jake Spoon, right alongside the Suggs brothers. And it's a stark scene. Jake is drunk, of course. He's been drunk most of the time he's been with them. But even so, he tries in a half-hearted way to plead for his life. He tells Augustus, I know you notice in the course of that scene that he doesn't really address any conversation to Call. He knows better. But he tries to explain to Gus that he was just trying to get to Kansas without getting scalped. That it's a tough thing to ride off from a mean psychopath like Dan Suggs. It's tough to do. But he waited too long. And we can see that even in the chapters long before he encounters justice at the hands of his old friends. We can see that he's waiting too long. I was reading those chapters again for this read-along, and I was thinking how completely different those chapters would have been if Jake Spoon had had anything in him like Call or McCrae, or anything in him like the little girl Janie, or July Johnson, for all his lack of experience. In Lonesome Dove, there is a clear line between good people and bad people, a clear line between right and wrong, and also a clear and utterly dispassionate line between strength and weakness. And some people just have it and some people don't. And we end that today. That is where our chapters end today, is with Jake Spoon swinging at the end of a rope alongside horse thieves. That is the end of the story that begins when he rides into Lonesome Dove at the beginning of this book. It's fairly melancholy, and I'm wondering if you thought the same thing in these chapters. Did you want more of the Remuda? Did you want more of Call and his crew, or were you okay with the digressions? I imagine you didn't mind the McCrae digressions because they're so good. But what about all that time spent with Jake Spoon? Did it make you any more sympathetic to him? Were you hoping that maybe Call and McCrae would do what I guarantee you a 21st century writer would have them do, which is to say, all right, well, you all hang, but not our old friend. Did that surprise you? I'm just curious to know what you make of Jake Spoon. We're done with him now. The whole narrative moves on from him. So this is his arc. What did you make of him? But that's that's where we finished today. We finished right at the start of part 3. Things move very fast from here on out. So we'll start part 3, and part 3 is the end of Lonesome Dove. So we will finish this up next week. When quite a bit happens. So we'll have plenty to talk about next Sunday, and I'm hoping that it is next Sunday. I'm sorry that I just took the day off, but I'm looking at barometric pressure and weather charts and whatnot, and I don't think Massachusetts is set for another heat wave anywhere like the little one that we just had anytime soon. So, so here's hoping. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.